people are thinking about when they come in is I want this ROAS target because they've backed out what that means for margin on an order basis. Like how much money they would make on an order, setting an aMER target versus how much spend we can get against the aMER target to produce the most contribution margin or in line with what your overall profitability goal is as a percentage of revenue there. That's the game we're playing here.
All right, today we were talking about the death of ROAS. Let's go.
Come on.
Taylor, the co-pilot, here with me in the cockpit. What's up?
My guy.
All right.
How we living?
So everyone talks about high ROAS like it's the holy grail of marketing metrics. We're going to be talking about why that's completely wrong to be thinking about that, how even some of our clients are achieving as low as target as possible to ultimately destroy their competition.
Come on.
aMER. Define that quickly if for the knuckleheads that haven't been listening to our podcast at all.
Tune in. Listen. Come on. Acquisition media efficiency ratio, just total new customer revenue divided by ad spend, new customer ROAS for sake of ease. Blended new customer ROAS.
Yeah, there you go. So I think it's not necessarily a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek on death to ROAS, right? Like we're not talking necessarily about, because aMER is synonymous with NC ROAS. We're just talking about, hey, from a channel agnostic perspective, we're looking at how is new customer growing at the efficiency that makes sense for the goals and business model that you guys have, right?
Yes. Death to, hey, this competitor is achieving a 4X. I need to go achieve a 5X. No, we want to go beat that competitor. Let's redefine what beating that competitor looks like.
So keep going there. So these are obviously, this is close to the chest because you're having these conversations with our clients that come to you and say, hey, such and such agency or someone on D2C Twitter is singing their praises of their 5 ROAS or whatever the thing is.
Right. Death to those pictures shared on LinkedIn and Twitter, some ad account screenshot with a 10x ROAS. It's just like, no, this is all wrong. But exactly right. I mean, what ultimately serves this conversation on the podcast today is, these are pretty frequent conversations that our team gets to have with clients on our end around, hey, target setting, around blended new customer ROAS. What should that be and why? And they'll bring up, hey, I was promised by this other agency that they can achieve a $5 CAC for my business, or, hey, my last year's ROAS was this, and so I want to beat it this year. And beating it when they say that to them was, I want to go from a 2 to a 2.5 where their ROAS is increasing. And that's where, hey, the conversation is actually, if you have a high ROAS, if your business requires you to have a high ROAS, a high new customer ROAS in your business, like that screenshot on Twitter, every time it's posted where there's a 10x of an ad account, all I want to comment is this business's operations and the LTV on this business, the cost of delivery, the cost centers are so poor. They are just getting waxed by their competition on all these other places.
Spend more money.
Yeah, where anybody that is like in need of achieving a 10x ROAS is a dying business. That's a dying business, and it's a beautiful screenshot for that day that people are going to fall victim to. And you're just leading people astray at the end of the day. So, okay, what are we talking about here then? Yeah, we want to compete to go after the lowest new customer ROAS possible that ultimately levels up to your overall profitability goal. And so there's probably a lot to unpack in that, but something to be said, we recently onboarded a brand in this where their aMER target is a 0.18. I'm sure no one's actually even heard of that. I haven't seen that before, but their business is so well set up across their cost centers and their LTV is through the roof, where at this point where they're at in their business, they're able to make that work and still level up to their overall profitability goal, which is an insane competitive advantage to have against the rest of your competitors, which we can dive into that as well in this pod.
I think what you're bringing up is the competitors within advertising channels, right? I
exactly.
think people forget that it's an auction at the end of the day. So these are people that you're competing for. And if I'm competing alongside you and I have a lower bid, I'm just going to scoop up way more customers, especially when it comes to cost controls. Regardless, even if you're running highest volume, you're just going to be able to acquire more customers if you have a lower bid and you're willing to acquire customers at that mark that makes sense for your business.
For sure. So I mean, like, how do you beat your competitors in the ad auction, for example, on Meta, right? Hey, Kinship, what do we provide? We're offering, creative at scale, right? Volume. That's one way you can beat your competitors, through offers for sure as well. Setting the right aMER target, but ultimately as well in this, like we're talking about, if all the variables remain the same in an ad account, but Cody, you have a brand where you're willing to acquire a customer for $100 and I'm only willing to spend and acquire them for $50. And if all the other variables are the same across creative and offer and all those things, account structure, it's all set up for complete optimization, like you're going to acquire that customer. And so what allows your business to be able to allow you to acquire that customer for $100? And it's the way everything else is set up across your cost centers and the LTV that you have with your product and your offer there. So you're going to win there. We're going to try to outcompete people from a creative standpoint, from an offer standpoint, from an ad account structure standpoint. But it's only going to get us so far if you're willing to bid double the money that I am.
Yes. This also brings up actually, I was having a conversation with someone that has a preferred agency out there. I won't say who it is, but I respect them. They do good work, but they, invest in businesses they work with. So they're kind of like in M&A and PE, and showing them our forecast, showing them what we do from a forecasting level view, P&L level view. And he was like, well, we are so dialed in on finances, I can just give you the CAC target. And I said, that's great. The problem with that, though, is if I don't have full visibility into what that CAC target means, or I don't know where you guys are, for example, if you are also on Amazon, I actually spend less money because I don't know the true impact of my ad spend. And I think this is kind of what you're getting at in the same line of thinking, right? Which is, this is also the problem of running Facebook ads in a silo, which is what my point in bringing that up, that story. Making and running Facebook ads in a silo is trying to make the dashboard look as sexy as possible. So as high as ROAS as possible, which to your example of our two brands, like I spend less money and I get less top line and bottom line money in achieving my goals. So there's so many issues with this, guys. Like it just goes to layers and layers upon issues with running into this problem and having a mindset of not having the full picture, and also too optimizing around a specific target into that silo channel, for example.
Yeah, death to higher ROAS goals and death to here's your set budget for the month and go achieve like as much efficiency as possible. It's just like, that's not the right way to think about this, guys. The right way to think about it is we need to be reverse engineering our aMER target based on your profitability goal overall as a business, which takes into consideration LTV, returning customer revenue, and all of your cost centers to be able to reverse engineer what you need to hit from an aMER standpoint, as well as how much you think you can spend against that. What if we have an unlock in creative though? Like, I don't want to spend a set budget against, as efficiently as possible. No, I want to go spend as much as I can. And if it's unlocked with creative, probably potentially, depending on the, how the rest of the cost centers and the LTV of the business works, will determine, do I need this aMER to be higher or lower, as well as like the brand's cash position in that sense. But yeah, a set budget is not the move either.
I think what you were bringing up earlier too, just double click on what you're kind of mentioning, was the year over year comparisons. Some of our even recent clients, maybe you could bring up that story as well.
Yeah, recently onboarded a client as well, and they were just sort of saying, hey, this was my, aMER target last year, and we want to beat that, right? Year over year. And so I just went into the conversation. It's like, hey, let's just define beat that. My ultimate goal here is to hit your overall profitability goal as a business and beat your top line revenue that you had year over year. That's how I would define beating what you previously did. That could be at a lower aMER than last year very easily. Hey, did your LTV increase? Did your cost centers get checked better in check? Hey, is you're experiencing growth here, but you kept fixed costs the same. So as a percentage of the revenue, it went down. So it's just defining beating.
By and large, it will be a lower aMER target, right? Like as you just as you keep advancing year over year and getting into the outer echelons of acquisition, it's just naturally just going to get harder and harder to acquire customers. And so the aMER target, obviously from a macro level, this isn't always the case, 100% proof, but as you get into those outer echelons, it's always usually
Right.
is going down.
And that's why it's so important to have retention and to have LTV. Like, for example, the brand that we surfaced with that 0.2 aMER target, their retention is some of the highest I've ever seen, where they pour into retention efforts and they pour into the quality of their product, where I think that is probably the area of most people's businesses where a lot of the time they spend the least amount of attention. Hey, we've acquired them now, and it's kind of like, okay, hit them with the onboarding email flow and maybe hit them a couple times thereafter, but there's not a ton of care and TLC there on out. Who has done that incredibly well and who has made it an effort from the beginning is Jack and Purdy and Fig. From the jump, hey, to the initial product unboxing experience that they see. Like, they just sent over, they're testing some shipments, and I just got one recently, and my wife opened up their packaging and she was like, man, they look like a really luxury brand. Like, it's really well done. It looks phenomenal. It's like that initial impression is everything. And then, okay, what does it look like thereafter? How are you reconnecting with that customer as well? That's something that they poured a lot of effort into. And I feel like it's the most neglected area of most people's businesses, where LTV in this day and age is everything. You have competitors that are able to acquire a customer at a 0.2. If you can't do that, which is mostly everybody, that's something to aspire towards. But you have to be thinking in this way. Otherwise, you're going to get left out of the auction. All the purchases are going to be gone by the time you even get into there to play.
Why do you think our clients, or just people in general, and I think I have an understanding of why they're thinking this way, but why do you think people are coming in the door and seeing, like, I must hold on to this target as long as possible? Like, basically, some of these conversations that are leading to, like, these true stories that you're having. Like, why do you think, what goes into that emotional tied to a target that they must hold or improve, or at least hold on to?
I think what people are thinking about when they come in is, I want this ROAS target, because they've backed out what that means for margin on an order basis. Like, how much money they would make on an order. So, like, if you have a 4 ROAS, that leads to, I don't know, $30 a margin. I'm going to do a 2 ROAS though, and it gets me $15 a margin. I want $30 a margin. But what if it only leads to 10 orders instead of 100 orders, which is a significant difference, right? And how much money it actually lends itself to. So that's the game we're playing, right? Setting an aMER target versus how much spend we can get against the aMER target to produce the most contribution margin, or in line with what your overall profitability goal is as a percentage of revenue there. That's the game we're playing here. So I think that's where they get lost in the sauce. It's a logical, like, train of thought. This lends me more profit on a per order basis, but that doesn't mean more profit overall based on the amount of spend you can get against those targets.
Which goes into the level of insight and the ways that we're coming alongside you guys. And I think every agency needs to be doing that. Otherwise, they're going to be a dying business, is because I can also understand the sentiment of, if my target's getting worse, is my business getting worse year over year? And they associate those two things as a, like, causal relationship versus, like, everything that we've said previously. And actually, like, and what you just said, which is just, well, no, Joe Schmo, like, this is actually how it backs into, this is what it'll lead to if this lower target year over year, but actually is greater top line and bottom line.
For sure.
Or it's hitting the goals that you guys have, right? So
yeah,
I think I get that sentiment, right? Like, when you're just looking at a CAC target and you've switched from 2 previous agencies and it's still not improving, what's going on? Is it my business? And it very well could be, like, some of those realities could be, but I think oftentimes, like, what we're trying to steer our clients to in this conversation is, it's not reflective of you, the business owner, or it's actually like, we should be going, this is a good thing. That's a lot of your sentiment. Like, this is what it leads to, guys. Like, let's not get lost in the sauce.
Right. And the reality is, more and more brands are understanding this, right? And so if you exist within a category that, typically has a high LTV, a lot of these other brands are going after those lower aMER targets, which means they're willing to bid more in the ad auctions, which means they're out competing you in those ad auctions. So it just puts a certain level of importance on, hey, I need to take care of the rest of my business from a cost center and LTV perspective to ensure that I'm able to continue to compete in the ad auctions on the acquisition side of things.
Let's go through different business models, right? Because I can imagine some people listening to this where it's like, yeah, I'm not Purdy and Fig. I don't have incredible LTV. I'm not the business that has what you mentioned with the 0.18 aMER target because of a heavy subscription or a very low entry offer. And I know how this backs into from a customer cohort based analysis, etc. So if you need to be first order profitable, and to be clear, we have clients that need to have a very high, we've had Nate from Wildbird on, right? Like talk about a very different aMER target compared to what we've been bringing up earlier. So I guess talk through the listeners about the difference in that and why that actually doesn't change the focus on aMER, but kind of just speak to it.
Really good question. Yeah, we're not saying on this podcast, you need to go hit a 0.2 or you're going to be waxed in the next year and your business is going to die. That's not what we're saying. The frame of mind that you need to have in this conversation or on this topic is my product category. What's my product category that I exist within? So like the product category that brand that has a 0.2 exists within is a really high LTV subscription category. So it is like who can have the lowest aMER in that product category. That's the framing of this. So like you brought up Wildbird, right? They sell baby carriers. So they're competing against other brands with baby carriers. That's a one-off like high AOV purchase, not a lot of LTV there. And so we are going after a higher aMER target, far higher than a 0.2. But we're still telling, Wildbird, let's come out with other products that can build LTV. Yeah. Right? That gets that higher aMER for his product category down as much as possible. So it's all relative to your product category that you exist within. You want to be the lowest aMER in your product category. And what does that look like? And you just have to take into consideration, okay, I want to have as efficient of cost delivery as I can. I want to have my fixed expenses at 10% of revenue. Don't want that to get bloated. Compete to keep that low. And then I want to have as great of an LTV as I want to have the best LTV in my product category. If you take care of all those three things, that's going to be a recipe to bring your aMER target down and make sure you're the first in the auction to acquire a customer before anybody else.
I'll throw one more in there, not having as high as a profitability target as you may think or want to.
Yeah, for sure.
Because the moment you start needing 20% or above for X, Y, or Z, we would try to get you to get that as low as possible. Again, based on the goals that you have, right? Like we have businesses that are actively trying to get acquired, very different versus a brand that is wanting to collect as much cash as possible. And of course, we want to optimize those targets, but I think it's just helping understand we will have more margin to go out and acquire customers from an aMER perspective if that profitability percentage or dollar amount doesn't need to be as high.
Yeah. And it ultimately means more profitability down the line too, right? Because what are you doing by going after a lower profitability, like percentage target right now? You're stealing market share. And when you steal market share, that ultimately leads to less competition down the line and you're better positioned to go after, greater margin at that point and overall greater profitability percentage.
Any final notes here?
I just think this is where, you brought up a good point with people running ad accounts siloed from the forecast. This is why it's so important for your paid media partner to be aware of this. Like death to high ROAS for sure, but death to here's your budget, go spend it as efficiently as possible, as reflected in the in-ad account ROAS. It's so important for your media partner to have an understanding and honestly be a part of leading the way on the forecast because they need to have such a good understanding of your LTV, such a good understanding of your cost centers to ultimately forecast out what that blended aMER target should be. And this is where I think we are uniquely positioned. I know people listening, running brands probably have their own ways to build forecasts for, returning customer revenue. And to be honest, that's not that hard. It's a pretty reliable, consistent thing where you apply your repeat rates and you can forecast out a returning customer revenue amount month over month. Where I think we're uniquely positioned, and I'll put us up against any CFO out there. I'll put us up against any, private equity firm. I don't even think this is a hot take once you listen to the reason. Are these people in ad accounts spending money? Are they doing that? Do they have an understanding of what amount of ad spend they can get out against a specific aMER or ROAS target? Do they have that? They have no experience. We have millions on millions of dollars every single month understanding how much we can spend against a specific target in a ton of different categories as well. No CFO has done that. Nobody at a PE firm has done that. We are uniquely positioned to do that on your behalf. And the new customer revenue side of things, again, the returning customer revenue side of things is not that hard to forecast out. And obviously, you know your cost centers. The new customer side of things is the most volatile piece, where we're in the weeds on all of these channels, understanding what's going on, right, and how much we can spend against different targets. And that's where we're very uniquely positioned to be a part of the forecasting process, and why we're better off than your CFO doing that exercise.
If you want to hear bi-weekly sermons from Taylor every 2 weeks, just come into the Bottom Line podcast and hear that, because that was a great way to end the episode. As always, hit subscribe if you're just discovering this episode for the first time, or follow along on wherever you listen to podcasts. And we are available to you to help you figure this out. We're also doing consistently, pretty frequently, free audits. That's inclusive of your business. Not just your ad account, but your full business. So basically how we're setting targets, how we're forecasting the business, understanding the current trajectory of the business if nothing changed, then ultimately seeing, hey, if Kinship or another agency that's equitable to us, which there's none, were to come alongside you, what's the impact that they would have on NC ROAS or aMER? So I'll leave that free offer there for you guys. Hit us up on Twitter, LinkedIn, wherever you may find us. Streaming. I forget the streaming. We're not on there. We're not gamers. Taylor has a kid on the way and I have one. So I'm rambling now. Thanks for tuning in, guys.
Oh, man. Thanks, guys.